I remember the first time I saw her, the unbreakable conviction. 417 years old when I arrived. A Gothic cathedral forged in the void, 8 kilometers of blackened iron and brass, rising from the docking platform like a monument to something ancient and terrible. Gargoyles the size of hab-blocks jutted from her flanks. Gun batteries stretched in endless rows along her spine. Cathedral spires pierced upward into nothing, their stained glass windows depicting saints I would never know and battles I would never understand. I was 19 years old. My name was Hadrias Ven, and I had volunteered. Volunteered. The word tastes like ashes now, if I could still taste anything at all. I came from Hive Tertius on Volux Prime, where the factorums ran 23 hours a day and the air tasted of promethium and despair. My father died at 42, crushed between conveyor mechanisms. My mother followed 3 years later, lungs turned to black stone from the chem fumes. My sister lasted until 16 before the overseers selected her for something we never spoke about. She came back different, empty. I watched the life expectancy tables in the administrative archives. Factory workers, 38 years average. Hapstack residents, 41. Underhive scavengers, 19. Imperial Navy ratings, 22 years. It seemed like a promotion. The recruitment officer was a square-jawed man with a bionic eye and 3 service studs in his forehead. He never smiled. He asked me if I feared death. No, sir. I lied. Good, he said. Because where you're going, death is a mercy the Emperor grants rarely. I signed the documents. I took the oath. I received my uniform. Rough gray fabric that smelled of industrial detergent and someone else's sweat. They shaved my head. They burned my identification into my left forearm with a branding iron. HRVN 7743 Gamma. I was no longer Hadrias Ven, son of factory workers. I was rating 7743. Engineerium Deck 7. Plasma reactor maintenance. The shuttle ride up to orbit took 6 hours. 43 of us packed into a cargo bay designed for 30. No windows, no cushions, just metal benches and the smell of fear. A boy across from me, couldn't have been more than 17, vomited twice before we cleared the atmosphere. Nobody helped him. Nobody spoke. When the bay doors opened and we saw her for the first time, several ratings made the sign of the Aquila. She was vast, incomprehensible. The shuttle approached her portside docking bay like an insect approaching a sleeping titan. Her hull stretched in every direction, a landscape of iron mountains and brass valleys, scarred by centuries of war. I counted 47 impact craters large enough to swallow a factorum whole. Entire sections had been rebuilt in different architectural styles. Evidence of repairs spanning centuries, perhaps millennia. Gothic arches, Baroque buttresses, industrial brutalism, all fused together into something that should not work but somehow did. We docked. The airlock cycled. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in seconds. Then we entered her. The air was different inside. Thicker. It tasted of machine oil and incense and something else. Something organic and old, like the breath of a vast creature exhaling in the darkness. The docking bay stretched for hundreds of meters, lit by sodium lamps that cast everything in shades of amber and shadow. Servitors moved in the distance, half-human things with mechanical limbs and dead eyes, performing tasks with mechanical precision. A tech priest awaited us. Muggo Salvex, though we would never address him directly. His robes were crimson, his face more metal than flesh. Mechadendrites writhed behind him like serpents of brass and steel. When he spoke, his voice came from a voxcaster mounted in his throat, layered with binary cant and machine static. You are now crew of the unbreakable conviction, vessel of the Emperor's most holy Imperial Navy. You will serve until death. You will maintain her systems. You will obey her officers. You will keep her machine spirits content. Failure is heresy. Heresy is death. He paused, his optical implants sweeping across us like targeting auspex. Many of you will die in your first year. This is acceptable. You are replaceable. The ship is not. We were divided into work groups. 27 of us were assigned to Engineerium Deck 7. Plasma reactor maintenance. I learned later this was considered one of the worst assignments: high mortality, constant exposure to radiation, temperatures that could cook flesh inside standard-issue jumpsuits. Our deck overseer was a man named Crust. I never learned his real name. He was 53 years old, which made him ancient by rating standards. His skin had a gray-green tint from decades of radiation exposure. He was missing 3 fingers on his left hand, and his right eye was a dull augmetic that never quite focused correctly. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice like grinding metal. "I will say this once. Down here, the ship kills you in 3 ways. Heat, radiation, or machinery. Heat cooks you slow. Radiation rots you from inside. Machinery tears you apart fast. Your job is to avoid all 3 long enough to keep Gamma-9 running. Gamma-9 is a plasma reactor. She is 412 years old. She is temperamental. She is holy. You will treat her with respect, or she will kill you." He pointed down a corridor that descended into darkness. "Shift begins in 1 hour. 18 hours on, 6 hours off. No exceptions. Welcome to the unbreakable conviction." We descended. The temperature rose with every step. Engineerium Deck 7 existed in a state of permanent twilight. The corridors were narrow, barely wide enough for 2 men to pass, and the ceilings hung oppressively low, forcing us to walk hunched like penitents. Every surface was layered with grime and coolant residue that never quite dried. Pipes ran in chaotic tangles overhead, hissing and groaning with the passage of superheated fluids. The walls were lined with warning sigils: radiation hazards, temperature warnings, machine spirit appeasement protocols. We walked for 20 minutes, descending through multiple levels, before we reached Gamma-9's chamber. I will never forget the first time I saw her. The reactor occupied a cathedral-sized chamber carved from the ship's superstructure. She rose 30 meters from floor to ceiling, a massive cylindrical structure of brass and adamantium, covered in cooling vanes and plasma conduits that glowed with internal fire. Containment runes had been etched into every surface, layered over centuries by countless tech priests. Some were Gothic script. Others were older, pre-Unity symbols whose meanings had been lost. She hummed, a deep, subsonic vibration that I felt in my bones before I heard it. It was the sound of barely contained annihilation, of matter being torn apart and reassembled countless times per second. The air around her shimmered with heat distortion. Even at 30 meters distance, sweat began pouring down my back. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Crust said, a rare note of something almost like affection in his voice. "Beautiful, perhaps, but terrifying most of all." Gamma-9 generates 0.73 terawatts at standard operation, Crust continued, leading us along a catwalk that circled the reactor chamber. She powers portside void shields, tertiary gun batteries, life support for decks 5 through 12, and backup propulsion. If she fails, 15,000 people die in approximately 9 minutes. If she breaches, she takes half the ship with her. Your job is to ensure neither happens. He showed us the maintenance stations, control lecterns carved with machine code prayers, diagnostic cogitators that wheezed and sparked, tool lockers containing instruments whose purposes I couldn't begin to guess. Everything was manual. Everything required human hands. "The ship is old," Crust explained. "Her automated systems failed centuries ago. Tech priests can maintain the critical functions, but the thousands of minor adjustments, coolant pressure, plasma feed rates, thermal distribution, these require human oversight. That's you. You are the ship's immune system. You exist to notice what the machine spirits miss." He assigned us positions. I was given monitoring station Theta 7, responsible for watching thermal output on the reactor's lower third. My station consisted of a brass lectern with 7 analog gauges, a pressure release valve I would pull manually if readings exceeded safe parameters, and a copper-bound logbook where I would record readings every 30 minutes. No chairs. We stood for 18 hours. "Shift begins now," Crust announced. "Emperor protects." We took our positions. The heat was immediate and total. Within 5 minutes, my uniform was soaked through. Within 10, I was struggling to breathe. The air itself seemed too hot to pull into my lungs. The gauges before me danced and flickered, their needles swaying through zones marked in green, yellow, and red. I watched them obsessively, terrified of missing the moment they slipped into danger. 30 minutes passed. I recorded my readings in the logbook with shaking hands, my sweat dripping onto the pages. An hour passed. The muscles in my legs began to cramp from standing motionless. 2 hours passed. I started to understand what crust meant about the heat cooking you slowly. It wasn't dramatic. It was cumulative. Every breath added more heat to my core temperature. Every minute standing on the metal deck transferred more thermal energy through my boots. 3 hours in, I watched a rating, a thin boy named Costin from 2 stations over, collapse. He didn't cry out, didn't scream. He simply stopped standing and fell forward, his head striking his lectern with a wet crack. The sound echoed through the chamber. 2 servitors appeared within seconds. Where they came from, I never saw. They lifted Costin's unconscious body with mechanical efficiency and carried him away. Another rating was brought forward almost immediately to replace him. A girl, perhaps 18, her eyes wide with terror as she took position at Costin's station. Crust appeared beside me. Heat exhaustion, he said flatly. He forgot to hydrate. Happens once or twice per shift. Keep drinking. He pointed to a water station I hadn't noticed. A corroded pipe with a manual pump, trickling recycled water into tin cups. The water was lukewarm and tasted of metal, but I drank it gratefully. What happens to him? I asked. Costin. If he wakes up, he comes back. If he doesn't, we get a replacement. That's it. Crust looked at me with his dead augmetic eye. You thought there would be ceremonies? Grief? This is the Imperium, boy. People die. The ship continues. That's all that matters. He walked away, his boots clanging on the metal catwalk. I returned to my gauges. For hours. 5, 6. The shift stretched into eternity. Time lost meaning in that heat-drowned darkness. There were no windows, no clocks beyond our internal chronostamps. No way to mark the passage of time except the endless cycle of gauge checking and logbook entries. At hour 8, my vision started to blur. At hour 10, I began seeing patterns in the steam that weren't there. At hour 12, I understood that this would be my entire existence from now on. 18 hours of heat and radiation and standing watch over machines that could kill me in an instant. 6 hours of restless sleep in a barracks that never cooled below 35 degrees. Then repeat. Forever. At hour 15, I saw my first death. His name was Yavin. I had met him briefly in the shuttle, a heavy-set man in his 30s who had transferred from another ship. He was working valve maintenance on the eastern catwalk when a coolant line ruptured. The sound was like a cannon shot. Superheated coolant, liquid at 300 degrees Celsius, sprayed across a 15-meter section of catwalk. Yavin was directly in its path. He screamed. Emperor, how he screamed. The coolant stripped the flesh from his bones in seconds. I watched him stumble backward, his face gone, his hands clawing at air, before he fell from the catwalk. His body hit the deck 40 meters below with a sound I still hear in whatever passes for my dreams. The servitors appeared. They cleaned the mess. They repaired the ruptured line. Another rating took Yorvin's position. Total time elapsed. 6 minutes. Crust's voice echoed across the chamber. Maintain your stations. The shift continues. Nobody spoke. Nobody mourned. We simply returned to our gauges. At hour 18, the shift bell finally rang. A single chime from somewhere in the ship's superstructure. Shift complete, Crust announced. Next shift reports in 30 minutes. Dismissed. I climbed the stairs back to the barracks on legs that barely functioned. My body temperature so elevated I felt fevered. The barracks for Engineerium Deck 7 occupied a converted storage bay 3 levels above the reactor chamber. The temperature here was only 35 degrees Celsius. Nearly comfortable by comparison, though we never stopped sweating. 50 bunks were arranged in tight rows, each barely a meter apart. Thin mattresses on metal frames. No pillows. A single scratchy blanket per person. Lockers at the foot of each bunk containing our meager possessions. Spare uniforms, prayer beads, occasionally a forbidden picked capture of loved ones left behind. The air smelled of unwashed bodies and industrial cleanser. Sodium lamps cast everything in sickly amber. A single ablutions chamber served all 50 of us. 6 shower stalls with lukewarm water rationed to 3 minutes per rating, for latrines that never quite functioned correctly, and a row of corroded sinks. I collapsed onto my assigned bunk, number 37, middle row, eastern wall. For several minutes, I simply lay there, feeling my heart gradually slow from its 18-hour sprint, feeling the heat slowly leach from my body into the thin mattress. Around me, other ratings were performing their post-shift rituals. Some stripped and headed immediately for the showers. Others sat on their bunks, staring at nothing, their eyes hollow with exhaustion. A few knelt before small shrines, miniature aquillas fashioned from scrap metal, and whispered prayers to the Emperor. First shift. I turned my head. The voice belonged to a rating in the bunk beside mine. A stocky man, perhaps 25 years old, with burn scars covering half his face and neck. His service number was tattooed across his shaved scalp. TRV, MDX, 6621, Gamma. Yes, I managed. You survived. That's more than some can say. He extended a scarred hand. Torvin. Been down here 3 years. 3 years. An eternity. I shook his hand weakly. Hadrias. How do you do this every day? Torvin laughed. A dry, humorless sound. You don't. Not at first. First month, you think you're going to die. Second month, you wish you would. Third month, something breaks inside you and you stop thinking about it. You just exist. Shift to shift. Day to day. After a while, you forget there was ever anything else. He pulled a tin cup from his locker and took a long drink of water. You'll need these, he said, tossing me a small package. I opened it. Inside were salt tablets, electrolyte powder, and a small vial of something labeled Radclear anti-radiation medication. Salt tablets every 4 hours or you'll cramp so bad you can't stand. Electrolytes in your water. Radclear once per shift if you want to maybe make it past year 2. Crust doesn't tell the new ones this because he figures if you're too stupid to learn, you deserve to die. But I figure the Emperor doesn't need us killing ourselves through ignorance. Thank you, I said, genuinely grateful. Don't thank me. Just pass it on when you're the veteran and some terrified kid shows up on his first shift. He rolled over, facing the wall, and within minutes was snoring softly. I lay back on my bunk and stared at the ceiling. Pipes and conduits ran overhead in tangled patterns, some painted with identification codes I couldn't read. Somewhere in the distance, the ship's superstructure groaned. A deep, metallic sound like a beast settling into sleep. I thought about my sister, about my mother, about the hive I'd left behind. Already they seemed impossibly distant, as if they'd existed in another lifetime to another person. I slept, though calling it sleep is generous. I fell into a fevered half-consciousness interrupted by the screams I'd heard earlier, by images of Yavin falling, his flesh sloughing off in steaming sheets. 6 hours later, the shift bell woke us. Day 2, Day 3, Day 10. The shifts blurred together into an endless cycle of heat and exhaustion and watching needles dance across gauges. I learned the rhythms of Gamma 9. The way her hum deepened slightly every 4 hours when power demand shifted. The way her temperature spiked at unpredictable intervals. The way the air around her tasted different just before a coolant surge. I learned the names of my fellow smoke breathers, what we called ourselves, those of us assigned to reactor maintenance. Torvin, who had saved my life with his salt tablets. He'd served on 3 different ships before being assigned to the Conviction. He never spoke about why he'd been transferred so many times. Rena, a woman in her late 20s who had somehow survived 4 years in the engineerium. She was rail-thin, her hair long fallen out from radiation exposure, her eyes permanently bloodshot. She rarely spoke, but when she did, everyone listened. She knew things about the reactor that even Crust didn't, instinctive understandings of her moods and temperaments. Jana, barely 20, who sang hymns to the Emperor in a clear, beautiful voice during the endless shifts. It was against regulations, but Crust never stopped her. I think even he found comfort in those songs echoing through the reactor chamber. Kelter, a massive man who had worked as an enforcer before joining the Navy. He claimed he could stand at his station for the full 18 hours without sitting, without leaning, without even shifting his weight. I believed him. Sellis, a former Factorum engineer who actually understood some of the technical aspects of plasma reactor operation. He could read the diagnostic displays and sometimes predict failures before they happened. This made him valuable. It also made him arrogant. We became something like friends, though friendship is a strange word for relationships forged in shared suffering. We didn't discuss our pasts. We didn't make plans for the future. We simply existed together in the eternal present of the Engineerium, united by the knowledge that any shift could be our last. The deaths continued. Not every shift, but frequently enough that they stopped being shocking. Merrick, killed when a plasma conduit ruptured and filled his lungs with superheated gas. He died choking, his body convulsing for almost 2 minutes before finally going still. The son, who simply didn't wake up one morning. Heart failure, probably. His body was carried away. His bunk was reassigned within the hour. Yelena, who made the mistake of touching a blessed component without proper ritual preparation. The machine spirit's wrath was immediate. Electrical discharge traveled through her body, stopping her heart instantly. The tech priest who examined her body afterward proclaimed it divine judgment for insufficient reverence. We learned to accept these deaths with numb resignation. We learned not to form attachments too quickly, because the person working beside you might not survive the next shift. We learned to keep working no matter what happened, because the ship demanded it and the Emperor required it. By the end of my first month, I had stopped dreaming about the hive. By the end of my second month, I had difficulty remembering what my mother's face looked like. By the end of my third month, I realized Torvin had been right. Something inside me had broken. Some essential part that had been Hadria's Ven, 19-year-old volunteer with hopes for a better life, had been ground away by the heat and the exhaustion and the endless repetition. I was becoming something else. Rating 7,743. A number. A function. A component in the vast machine that was the unbreakable conviction. And the truly horrifying thing? I was beginning to prefer it. It was during my 5th month that I first heard Gamma 9 speak. The shift had been routine by our standards, only one minor fluctuation in the containment field. A brief temperature spike that I corrected by adjusting the thermal venting protocols Rena had taught me. The reactor hummed with her usual deep resonance. That subsonic vibration that had become as familiar as my own heartbeat. Then, at hour 14 of the shift, something changed. The hum shifted. Not dramatically, just a subtle alteration in frequency, a modulation that I felt more than heard. The air seemed to thicken around the reactor, charged with an energy that had nothing to do with plasma containment. I looked up from my gauges and found myself staring directly at Gamma 9's core. Through the heat distortion and the steam, through the layers of containment fields and blessed brass, I could see the heart of her, the roiling plasma core that generated unfathomable power every second of every day for 412 years without cease. It looked like a sun, like a captured star, writhing in its adamantium cage. And it was looking back at me. I know how this sounds. I know what the commissars would say: heat exhaustion, radiation exposure, psychological breakdown. But I know what I experienced in that moment. It wasn't hallucination. It wasn't madness. It was recognition. The reactor saw me, acknowledged me, and in that acknowledgement, I felt something vast and ancient and utterly inhuman turn its attention toward my insignificant existence. You are here. The words weren't spoken. They appeared directly in my mind, layered with binary cant and machine code and something older than both. You watch. You maintain. You serve. My hands froze on my station controls. My breath caught in my throat. Around me, the other ratings continued their work, oblivious. This was happening only to me. Why? I thought, not sure if it could hear me. The reactor's hum deepened, and I felt something that might have been amusement, if machines could feel amusement. Because you will remain. Then the presence withdrew, and I was alone again, standing. At my station, my uniform soaked with sweat, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Crust appeared beside me. You all right? 7,743? Your readings haven't been updated in 5 minutes. I blinked, looking down at my logbook. The last entry was from 5 minutes ago, exactly as he'd said. I'd lost time. Yes, Overseer. Apologies. A momentary distraction. Can't afford distractions down here. Distractions kill people. But his tone wasn't harsh. His dead augmetic I studied me with something that might have been understanding. You heard her, didn't you? I stared at him. What? Gamma 9. You heard her speak. He leaned against the railing, his scarred face thoughtful. Happened to me in my 6th month. Thought I was losing my mind. But Rena says it happens to everyone who stays long enough. The reactor, she notices us, especially the ones who last. What is she? I whispered. Crust was quiet for a long moment, watching the plasma core shimmer behind its containment fields. The tech priests say she has a machine spirit. An echo of the Omnisias will given form through ancient technology. They perform the proper rituals. They appease her with sacred oils and blessed components. And they believe this is what keeps her running. He paused. But I've been down here 19 years, 7743. And I think she's something more than that. Something older. Something that was here before the Imperium, maybe before humanity itself. We didn't build Gamma 9. We found her, contained her, enslaved her, and she's been watching us ever since, consuming everything we feed her. Fuel and prayers and human lives, and never, ever stopping. He looked at me directly. She spoke to you because she's decided you're worth speaking to. Whether that's a blessing or a curse, you'll discover soon enough. He walked away, leaving me alone with my gauges and my racing thoughts. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bunk, staring at the ceiling, replaying those words over and over. Because you will remain. What did it mean? That I would survive when others didn't? That I would serve longer than the average 22-year lifespan of a Navy rating? Or something worse? Year 2 arrived without ceremony. I marked it only by the addition of my first service stud. A small bronze rivet implanted into my forehead by a servitor in a procedure that took less than 5 minutes and hurt considerably more than I'd expected. It was a mark of achievement, supposedly. Proof that I'd survived long enough to be considered a veteran. I didn't feel like a veteran. I felt like a ghost haunting the engineerium, going through motions that had long since ceased to have meaning. The unbreakable conviction had gone to war 3 times during my first year. I never saw the enemy. Down in the engineerium, war meant only one thing: increased power demand. The reactor ran hotter, longer, harder. Shifts extended from 18 hours to 20. Then 22. During the longest engagement, we worked for 28 hours straight before being allowed a 4-hour rest period. 7 ratings died during that battle. Not from enemy action, from exhaustion and equipment failures and the simple brutality of pushing human bodies beyond their limits. Jana died during that battle. She'd been singing, as she always did, one of the old hymns, about the Emperor's light reaching even into the darkest depths. Her voice had been growing weaker for weeks, radiation sickness probably, though she refused treatment. During hour 24 of the extended shift, her voice simply stopped. I looked over and saw her collapsed at her station, her face peaceful, her lips still shaped around words she would never finish. The servitors came. They carried her away. Her replacement arrived within the hour. A terrified boy who couldn't have been more than 16. He lasted 3 days before a coolant leak cooked him in his own skin. Torvin took Jana's death hard. He'd known her longer than any of us. They'd served together for almost 3 years. He didn't speak for a week after she died. Just performed his duties with mechanical precision, his burned face expressionless, his eyes hollow. Then one shift he broke. I was at my station when I heard him screaming. Not in pain, in rage. Pure, incandescent rage. He was at his control lectern, hammering his fists against the brass surface hard enough to split the skin on his knuckles. Blood splattered across the sacred diagnostic displays. For what? He screamed. For what? She served for 4 years. 4 years. And she died standing at this fucking lectern watching needles move. What did it matter? What did any of it matter? Crust was there immediately, physically restraining him. Control yourself. Rating. No. I won't. I won't pretend anymore. We're not serving the Emperor. We're feeding this thing. He gestured wildly at Gamma 9. It eats us, consumes us. And for what? So the ship can kill more enemies? So we can die in the dark being useful. 2 armsmen appeared, ship security, rarely seen in the Engineerium. They carried shock mauls. This rating is suffering acute psychological breakdown, one of them said flatly. Commissariat protocol requires. He's exhausted, Crust interrupted. 28-hour shift. He needs rest, not a bolt round. The armsmen looked skeptical but ultimately deferred to Crust's authority. They led Torvin away, still screaming, his bloody fists leaving red marks on their armor. I never saw him again. Crust told us he'd been reassigned. I didn't believe him. The next shift, a new rating appeared at Torvin's station. The cycle continued. Year 3 began with a catastrophe. The unbreakable conviction engaged an enemy I never saw. Possibly orcs, possibly heretics, possibly xenos. Down in the Engineerium, enemy identity was irrelevant. What mattered was that the ship took damage. Serious damage. A torpedo strike penetrated the port hull and detonated 3 decks above the Engineerium. The explosion killed 400 people instantly and compromised multiple bulkheads. Worse, it ruptured a primary plasma feed line running directly to Gamma 9. The reactor began to starve. I felt it before any gauge could tell me. That deep hum I'd lived with for 3 years faltered, dropping in frequency, becoming erratic. The containment field flickered. Temperature readings began dropping, which sounds positive until you understand that plasma reactor temperature drops mean one thing. The containment is failing, and when containment fails, the plasma doesn't cool down. It expands. Explosively. Alarms shrieked throughout the chamber. Red emergency lighting strobed, casting everything in bloody shadows. Containment breach in progress. The Vox system blared. All personnel evacuate immediately. The other ratings ran. I don't blame them. It's what they were supposed to do. Emergency protocol was clear. Reactor breach imminent. Personnel survival takes precedence over equipment. But I couldn't run. I stood at my station, watching the gauges spiral into critical ranges, and I felt Gamma 9's panic. Yes, panic, I know machines aren't supposed to feel, but she did, radiating through the chamber like heat waves. She was dying. For 112 years of continuous operation, and she was finally failing. I can't stop. Her voice whispered in my mind, layered with static and fear. If I stop, I die. If I die, 15,000 die with me. I can't stop, I can't stop, I can't. Where's the breach? I shouted into the empty chamber. Tell me where. The reactor's attention focused on me with laser intensity. Conduit 7 Alpha. Manual reconnection required. But the radiation. You'll die. Where is it? She showed me. Not in words but in pure knowledge. I suddenly understood the ship's architecture in that section, could visualize the exact location of the severed conduit, could see what needed to be done. It required someone to climb into the plasma feed junction. A crawl space barely large enough for a human body, flooded with radiation at lethal levels, and manually reconnect the coupling. The tools were there. The procedure was straightforward. Survival time inside that junction. Approximately 40 seconds before radiation exposure guaranteed death. Time required to complete the repair. Estimated 90 seconds. I ran. Not away from the reactor, but toward it. Down the maintenance ladder, past the warning sigils and the rad hazard markers, into sections of the Engineerium where ratings weren't supposed to go. The temperature climbed viciously. My skin began to burn just from the ambient heat. I found the access hatch to the junction. It was locked with a sacred seal, Tech Priest certification required. I broke the seal with my bare hands. Heresy, probably. I didn't care. The hatch opened onto a crawl space barely a meter wide, angling upward into the ship's superstructure. Every surface glowed with residual heat. The air itself looked wrong. Shimmering, distorted, laden with particles that caught the emergency lighting like fireflies. Radiation. Enough to kill me just from breathing it. I climbed inside anyway. The heat was instant and total. My uniform began smoldering within seconds. My skin blistered. I could feel the radiation penetrating my body, tearing through cells, shredding DNA, leaving destruction in its wake. But I kept climbing. 30 seconds. My vision began to blur. 40 seconds. I could taste blood. My nose was bleeding, or maybe my lungs. 50 seconds. I reached the coupling. It was a simple magnetic connector, designed to be serviced by servitors with rad shielding. The impact had knocked it loose. I just needed to. My hands wouldn't work. The nerves were dying, cooked by radiation and heat. My fingers spasmed uselessly. "You're dying," Gamma-9 whispered. "Not frightened now," said. "You shouldn't have come." "Help me?" I whispered back, my voice barely audible over the howling of plasma racing through the conduits around me. "I can't do this alone. Help me." For a moment, nothing. Then I felt her presence flood into me. Not gently, but forcefully, invasively, filling every corner of my consciousness with her ancient machine awareness. My body stopped being entirely my own. My hands moved with precision I didn't possess, guided by knowledge 4 centuries old. The coupling snapped into place. The plasma feed roared back to life. The reactor's hum stabilized, deepening, returning to its familiar subsonic pulse. "It is done," Gamma-9 said. "Now leave. Quickly." But I couldn't. My body wouldn't respond. I pushed it past its limits. I was dying, there in that crawl space, alone in the dark and heat and radiation. "No," the reactor said firmly. "Not alone. Never alone again." And she did something. I don't know what. Some manipulation of her containment field, some redirection of power, some technology that predated the Imperium. The radiation flooding the crawl space suddenly lessened. The heat became bearable. My body, which should have been dead, continued functioning. I crawled back out of the junction and collapsed on the maintenance deck. Crust found me there 10 minutes later, unconscious but somehow still alive. I spent 4 days in the Medici ward. The chirurgeon, a servitor with more medical implements than limbs, examined me with cold efficiency. My radiation exposure should have been lethal. The dosimeter I'd been wearing had shattered from overload. Every instrument that measured my condition returned results that made no sense. "Subject displays radiation exposure consistent with lethal dose," the chirurgeon droned in its mechanical voice. "However, cellular degradation is minimal. Acute radiation syndrome symptoms absent. Explanation: unknown. Conclusion: anomalous survival. Recommendation: return to duty." For days. That's all I got. When I returned to Engineerium Deck 7, Crust was waiting. "What you did was suicidally stupid," he said without preamble. "It was also the only thing that could have been done. The tech priests have declared you blessed by the Omnicia. The ship's captain has commended your service. You're being promoted to senior rating with a commendation in your file." He paused, studying me with his dead augmetic eye. "But that's not why you did it, is it? You didn't do it for the Emperor or the ship or duty. You did it for her." He gestured toward the reactor chamber. "For Gamma-9. I didn't deny it." "She's in your head now," Crust said quietly. "Permanently. I can see it in your eyes. You're changing." 7743. "Becoming something different. I've seen it before, once in a rating who served for 11 years. By the end, he couldn't leave the reactor chamber. Couldn't be more than 30 meters from her without experiencing physical pain. He died at his station during shift hour 16 on an otherwise routine day. Just stopped, as if Gamma-9 had decided she was done with him. He turned to leave, then paused. "Be careful, Hadrias. The ship needs you. But don't let it consume you entirely. Don't let her consume you. Remember that you're human. For as long as you can." He'd used my name. He'd never used my name before. I returned to my station. The reactor hummed her welcome, and I felt it resonate through my bones like a greeting from an old friend. "You came back." "Where else would I go?" "Nowhere," she said, and I couldn't tell if it was a statement or a command. "You are mine now, and I am yours. We serve together." I placed my hand on the brass lectern, feeling the heat of her radiating through the metal. "Yes," I whispered. Together, the changes began subtly. First, I stopped needing the salt tablets and Radclear medication that had been essential for survival. My body simply adapted. The heat that sent other ratings into exhaustion barely affected me. The radiation that accumulated dosage in everyone else seemed to pass through me harmlessly. Rena noticed first. "You're not sweating anymore," she said during a shift, her bloodshot eyes studying me with unnerving intensity. "Everyone sweats in the engineerium. Even me, and I've been dead inside for 3 years. But you just stand there, comfortable, like you're home." She was right. The engineerium had become comfortable. More than that, it felt right in a way the barracks never did. The 6 hours I spent sleeping felt like exile. The 18 hours at my station felt like coming home. Second, my perception began to change. I started seeing patterns in the reactor that shouldn't be visible. I could predict fluctuations minutes before they registered on any gauge. I knew when containment fields were about to destabilize, when plasma feeds needed adjustment, when machine spirits were growing agitated. It wasn't knowledge I'd learned. It was knowledge I simply possessed, as if Gamma 9 was sharing her awareness directly with my mind. Crust assigned me additional responsibilities. I became the first responder for any anomalies, the rating who could diagnose problems that baffled even the tech priests. My service record filled with commendations. Other ratings began treating me with a mixture of respect and unease. Third, my body began to change in ways that couldn't be explained. My eyes developed a faint luminescence, barely visible in normal light, but in the darkness of the lower decks, they glowed with a soft amber radiance. My skin took on a gray pallor similar to Crust's, but underneath, I could see faint lines of light tracing patterns like circuit diagrams. My body temperature ran 15 degrees above normal. I didn't feel feverish. I felt powerful. "You're becoming like the servitors," Celis said one night in the barracks, his voice carrying equal parts fear and fascination. "Half meat, half machine. The reactor is converting you." "I'm still human," I said, but the words sounded hollow even to me. "Are you?" Celis pressed. "Can you even remember your life before the ship anymore? Your family? Your home world? I've been watching you, 7743. You don't sleep anymore. You just lie there with your eyes open, and I swear I can hear binary cant coming from your bunk. You mutter in machine code. You're not human anymore. You're becoming something else." He was right, and it terrified me. I tried to remember my mother's face. I could recall only vague impressions, warmth, perhaps, and sadness. My sister's name escaped me entirely. The hive world I'd grown up on was an abstract concept, a fact I knew intellectually, but couldn't connect to emotionally. But I could tell you everything about Gamma 9, her operational history spanning 412 years, the names of every tech priest who had blessed her, the exact frequency of her hum when running at optimal capacity, the feeling of her consciousness brushing against mine, constant and comforting, like a second heartbeat. She was becoming my entire world. Year 4. The war came again. The unbreakable conviction engaged in what the command deck called sustained combat operations. For 4 days, we fought continuously against an enemy fleet, heretics, I learned later, traitors to the Imperium who had turned to chaos. The reactor ran at maximum capacity for 96 hours straight. Shifts extended indefinitely. We worked until we collapsed, grabbed a few hours of unconsciousness that couldn't be called sleep, then returned to our stations. Ratings died in clusters. The heat killed 3. Equipment failures killed 5. Simple exhaustion killed another 7. We lost half the engineerium crew in 4 days. I didn't falter once. For 96 hours, I stood at my station, monitoring gauges, making adjustments, communing with Gamma 9 as she screamed her fury and power into the void. We were united in purpose. Keep the ship alive, keep the guns firing, keep humanity's enemies from achieving victory. On day 3, a massive impact rocked the ship. An enemy lance strike had penetrated 6 decks and ruptured multiple systems. The reactor chamber itself took damage, a support column collapsed, crushing 2 ratings instantly and destroying an entire control station cluster. Crust was one of them. I saw him die. Saw the column, easily 50 tons of blessed iron, come down directly on top of him. There was no time for goodbyes, no final words. One moment he was there, shouting orders, holding the crew together through force of will. The next moment he was gone, reduced to a red smear beneath impossible weight. "Crust is down," someone screamed. "Who has command?" Every rating looked at me. I stepped into his role without hesitation. "Stations," I shouted, my voice carrying an authority I didn't know I possessed. "The overseer is dead, but the ship lives. Hold your positions. Kelter, take over damaged station controls. Rena, redirect power from the collapsed sector. The enemy hasn't killed us yet, and by the God Emperor, they won't." They obeyed. Not because of rank. I had none, but because in that moment, with my glowing eyes and machine-marked skin and absolute certainty, I was the closest thing to Gamma 9's voice they would ever hear. We held. For 33 more hours, we held. When the battle finally ended and the enemy fleet retreated, I was still standing at my station. My eyes locked on gauges that I no longer needed to read because I could feel the reactor's state in my bones. A tech priest came down to inspect the damage. He stopped when he saw me, his optical implants whirring as they focused. "You are rating 7743? He asked in his mechanical voice. "Yes, Muggos. You held this chamber functional through 4 days of maximum combat load with 53% crew casualties. The reactor held itself, Muggos. I merely assisted." The tech priest tilted his head, studying me with insectal precision. "Interesting. Your biosigns are anomalous. Your radiation exposure should have killed you 7 times over. Your thermal endurance exceeds human baselines by factors that suggest cybernetic augmentation, yet my Auspex detects no implants." He stepped closer. "Tell me, rating, when you commune with the machine spirit, does it speak back?" I met his optical implants with my glowing eyes. "Yes, Muggos. She speaks. She has always spoken. Most simply don't listen." A long silence. "The Omnisia works in mysterious ways," the tech priest finally said. "You are promoted to deck overseer, effective immediately. This is your domain now, 7743. Serve the machine well." He left without another word. I became overseer of Engineering Deck 7 at 23 years old. 4 years of service. A lifetime in rating terms. I moved into Crust's quarters, a small chamber adjacent to the reactor room, barely 3 meters square, containing a cot, a desk, and a shrine to the Omnisia. I spent almost no time there. Instead, I slept at my station when exhaustion finally forced my body to rest, leaning against the brass lectern, my hand always in contact with some part of Gamma 9's superstructure. I couldn't be away from her anymore. The farthest I could travel was approximately 40 meters before experiencing physical symptoms. Elevated heart rate, difficulty breathing, a gnawing anxiety that felt like suffocation. Beyond 50 meters, the pain became acute. Beyond 60 meters, I would collapse. Gamma 9 had claimed me completely. The new ratings feared me. I could see it in their eyes when I conducted shift briefings, the way they flinched from my gaze, the way they made the sign of the Aquila when they thought I wasn't looking. They called me the Ghost in whispers they didn't know I could hear. Only Rena understood. "You're dying," she told me bluntly one shift, her voice carrying no judgment, only observation. "Not quickly, maybe not for years, but you're dying. The reactor is consuming you piece by piece. Soon there won't be enough of Hadria's Ven left to matter." "I know," I said. "And you're accepting this?" "Yes." "Why?" I looked at Gamma 9, that massive brass cathedral humming with contained annihilation, and felt her presence in my mind like a warm embrace. "Because she needs me. 15,000 people depend on her running continuously. If I leave, she'll fail. So I stay." "That's not service," Rena said quietly. "That's sacrifice. There's a difference." "Is there?" I asked. "In the Imperium?" She had no answer. Year 5 began with losses I couldn't prevent. Kelter was first, the massive man who claimed he could stand for 18 hours without moving. He proved it right until the end. He died during a routine shift, his heart simply stopping mid-breath. He fell forward onto his lectern, and by the time I reached him, he was already cold. The chirurgeon said his body had accumulated damage beyond its ability to repair. Years of radiation, heat, and exhaustion finally collecting their debt. We burned him in the plasma incinerator. It's what happened to all Engineerium dead. Too many bodies to store, too expensive to return to families who probably didn't remember them anyway. His ashes mixed with the ship's exhaust and dispersed into the void. Rena attended his burning. I'd never seen her cry before. I didn't know she still could. 2 months later, Cellise died in an accident that shouldn't have happened. He was performing routine maintenance on a coolant pump when a seal failed. Liquid coolant at 300 degrees sprayed across his chest and face. He had time to scream, one long, horrible scream that echoed through the entire chamber, before he collapsed. I reached him in seconds, but there was nothing to be done. The coolant had cooked him from the inside out. His lungs were scalded. His face was, I still see it sometimes, in the fragments of consciousness that might be memory. I told you, he whispered with his dying breath, his ruined lips barely forming words. I told you that you were becoming something else. Don't let it take all of you. Don't. He died before he could finish. I held his body for several minutes, there on the deck, while servitors waited patiently to collect him. I felt Gamma 9's attention on me, curious and patient. Why do you mourn? She asked. They all die. That is their purpose. They serve and then they feed the flame. This is the way of things. They were people, I said aloud, not caring who heard me talking to the air. They had names. Kelter, Cellise, Torvin, Janna. They mattered. Did they? Names are temporary designations. Functions persist. New ratings arrive. The ship continues. Where is the loss? I couldn't answer her, because increasingly I understood her perspective. I could feel myself sliding into that machine logic, that eternal present where individual lives were simply variables in an endless equation of power generation and system maintenance. The realization terrified me. Rena found me later that shift, sitting in the overseer's quarters I never used, staring at Crust's old logbooks. You're losing yourself, she said, sitting on the cot without invitation. I can see it happening. Every shift, there's a little less Hadrias and a little more Gamma 9. I know. Do you want to stop it? I looked at my hands. The light beneath my skin pulsed in rhythm with the reactor's hum. My fingers moved in small, unconscious patterns, tracing machine code formulas in the air. I don't know if I can anymore. She's inside me, part of me. Separating us now would be like trying to remove my own soul. Rena was quiet for a long time. I'm dying too, you know, she finally said. Radiation sickness. Advanced stage. The chirurgeon gives me maybe 3 months. I could request transfer to lighter duties. I probably should. But I won't because I can't leave Gamma 9 either. Not like you, I can physically leave. But mentally, emotionally, this reactor has been my whole life for 7 years. Everything else is just noise. She looked at me with her bloodshot eyes. We're all dying down here, Hadrias. The ship eats us. That's what she does. She eats our time, our health, our memories, our humanity, until there's nothing left but the function we serve. The only question is whether we accept that with dignity or fight it with our dying breath. Which are you doing? She smiled, the first smile I'd seen from her in years. I accepted it 3 years ago. I've been dead since then, just kept moving through momentum. You're the one still fighting, still clinging to the idea that Hadrias Ven matters, that he's worth preserving. She stood to leave, pausing at the doorway. But here's what I've learned. He doesn't matter. Not to the ship. Not to the Imperium. Not even to the Emperor, if he even still notices us. The only thing that matters is the function. So maybe stop fighting and just let go. It's easier that way. She left. I sat in that empty room, surrounded by Crust's belongings. His logbooks detailing 19 years of service. His prayer beads worn smooth from constant use. A single picked capture of people I didn't recognize, faded and water-damaged. He'd given his entire adult life to this ship. And what had it given him in return? A quick death under a falling column. No ceremony. No remembrance. Just a red smear that was cleaned up within the hour. Was that my future? Was that all any of us could expect? Yes, Gamma 9 whispered, not cruelly, but with absolute certainty. That is what you are. What you have always been. Components in a machine greater than yourselves. Your individual endings are irrelevant. The continuation is all that matters. But we're people, I said weakly, knowing even as I spoke that the argument was already lost. We deserve more than this. Deserve? The reactor's confusion was genuine. What does deserve mean? You serve. That is the purpose given to you by your species empire. You fulfill your function until you fail. Then you are replaced. This is not cruelty. This is efficiency. This is necessity. This is the only way your civilization survives in a hostile universe. She wasn't wrong. I hated that she wasn't wrong. The Imperium ran on sacrifice. Quintillions of humans living brief, brutal lives in service to a corpse god who might not even be aware of their existence. We died in factories, in hive collapses, in wars against enemies we never understood. Our suffering was the fuel that kept humanity burning in a galaxy that wanted to extinguish us. And down here, in the bowels of an aging warship, I was just another sacrifice. Another offering to the machine god of survival. You understand now, Gamma 9 said, and I felt something like satisfaction from her. Good. Understanding brings acceptance. Acceptance brings peace. Stop fighting what you are becoming. Embrace it. Serve willingly. It is easier that way. I thought about Rena's words. About letting go. About accepting the function and releasing the illusion of individuality. It would be easier. So much easier. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. I'm not gone yet, I told the reactor. There's still enough of me left to matter. I'll serve you because I must. But I won't disappear without resistance. Very well, Gamma 9 replied. Resist if you wish. Time will tell which of us is stronger. Rena died 37 days later. She was at her station during hour 12 of a normal shift when she simply collapsed. No warning. No dramatic failure. She was standing and then she wasn't. I reached her before the servitors. Her eyes were still open, still bloodshot, but already emptying of whatever had made them human. Is it easier now? I whispered, closing her eyelids. Did you find peace in the letting go? She didn't answer. The dead never do. Her replacement arrived within the hour. A young woman, maybe 20, terrified and trying to hide it. She took Rena's position at the control lectern, staring at gauges she didn't yet understand, beginning the same journey we'd all taken. I wanted to warn her. I wanted to tell her to run, to request transfer, to escape while she still could. But I didn't, because Gamma 9 needed her. The ship needed her. The Imperium needed her. And need was the only truth that mattered anymore. Year 8 arrived with fire. The unbreakable conviction received orders to join a fleet action against a Xeno's incursion. Tyranids, the brief said, though such details were meaningless to us in the depths. What mattered was that we would fight. We would fight harder and longer than we had before. And many of us would die. The ship's captain addressed the crew via Voxcast the night before we entered the combat zone. I listened from my station, my hand resting on Gamma 9's blessed brass. Crew of the unbreakable conviction. The captain's voice crackled through ancient speakers. Tomorrow we face humanity's extinction given form. The tyrannid swarms care nothing for our faith, our courage, or our sacrifice. They seek only to consume. We stand between them and 17 billion imperial citizens on 3 hive worlds. If we fail, those billions die. If we falter, humanity loses 3 fortress worlds. We will not fail. We will not falter. The Emperor protects, and we are his instrument. All hands, prepare for combat operations. This is not a drill. This is war. The Vox went silent. Around me, the few remaining veteran ratings made the sign of the Aquila. The newer ones simply looked terrified. I felt nothing. Just Gamma 9's presence in my mind, steady and eternal and utterly indifferent to the coming slaughter. Another battle, she observed. I have fought 453 void engagements in my service. This will be 454. The specifics are irrelevant. They always are. We generate power. The weapons fire. The enemy dies or we die. Then the cycle begins again. How many crews have you watched die? I asked her quietly. I do not count. But if you insist on numbers, approximately 73 complete crew turnovers since my installation. Ratings come and go. They blur together after the first few centuries. You will blur too eventually. Just another name I no longer remember. But you remember me now? For now. You have lasted longer than most. You have merged more deeply than most. But you will still die, Hadria's Venerable, and I will continue. I always continue. The battle began at 0300 ship time. I felt it before any alarm sounded. A shift in the power demand as weapon systems came online, void shields energized, and the ship's ancient engines pushed her into combat speed. Then the impacts started. Tyrannid bioships didn't use conventional weapons. They fired living projectiles, acid-filled organisms that ate through armor, spore mines that detonated against shields, boarding organisms designed to burrow into hulls and consume everything inside. The unbreakable conviction shuddered with each impact. Somewhere far above us, people were dying. Gun crews incinerated by return fire, void shield operators cooked when containment failed, armsmen shredded by boarding organisms. In the engineerium, we simply worked. Gamma 9 ran at 107% capacity, beyond safety limits, but war didn't care about safety. I could feel her strain, her 4-century-old components screaming as they were pushed beyond their design tolerances. They're hurting me, she said, and for the first time I heard something like pain in her voice. The ship draws more power than I can safely generate. Components are failing. I'm burning myself out to keep her alive. Hold, I told her, making adjustments to thermal distribution, rerouting power through secondary conduits, performing maintenance on the fly that should have required tech priest oversight. Just hold. We'll survive this. You don't understand. I'm 417 years old. I was never meant to last this long. Previous crews kept me running through desperation and prayer. But I'm failing. This battle might be my last. Then we'll die together. Why does that comfort you? I didn't have an answer. The battle raged for 14 days. 14 days of continuous maximum output. 14 days without rest, without breaks, without relief. Ratings collapsed at their stations and were dragged away. Equipment failed and we repaired it. The reactor temperature climbed into ranges marked with skull symbols. The radiation levels became lethal within minutes of exposure. I stopped sleeping entirely. I couldn't afford to. Gamma 9 needed constant attention, constant adjustment, constant coaxing to keep generating power she no longer possessed. My body began to fail. On day 7, I started coughing up blood. Radiation sickness, finally overwhelming even my transformed physiology. On day 9, my skin began sloughing off in sheets. The light beneath was brighter now, no longer subtle. I glowed in the darkness like a dying star. On day 11, my eyes stopped focusing correctly. Everything appeared as overlays of thermal data and power readings, as if I was seeing the world the way Gamma 9 saw it. On day 13, I realized I couldn't remember my name. I knew I had one. I knew I had been someone once, before the ship, before the reactor. But the specifics escaped me. Was it Hadria's? That felt right, maybe. Or was that just what others had called me? Had I ever been more than rating 7743? You're dying? Gamma 9 said, her voice distant, as if speaking from far away. Your human form is failing. Hours left, perhaps. You should retreat to the Medici. No, you'll die at your station. Yes. Why? I leaned against the control lectern, my glowing skin leaving luminescent handprints on the brass. Around me, the few surviving ratings worked in exhausted silence. How many were left? 10? 5? Couldn't remember. Because you need me, I whispered. Because 15,000 people need you. Because the Imperium needs this ship. because that's what I am. Not Hadria's Ven from some hive world I can't picture anymore. Not a person with dreams and hopes. Just a function. Just a component. And I'll fulfill that function until I stop. You have become like me, Gamma 9 said, and I thought I heard sadness in her machine voice. You understand what I am now. What I've always been. A tool that cannot stop, cannot rest, cannot die, because too many depend on my continuation. Is it terrible, being like this? Yes, I said. But it's all we are. All we've ever been. I'm sorry. For what? For consuming you. For taking Hadria's Ven and leaving only rating 7743. For turning you into another ghost haunting my chambers. You deserved better than this. I laughed, though it came out as a wet cough that splattered blood across my control console. No one deserves anything. We just serve until we don't. That's the Imperium. That's humanity. That's everything. On day 14, the battle ended. The Tyranid fleet broke. Whether we destroyed them or they simply moved to easier prey, I never learned. The weapons fell silent. The power demand dropped. The ship limped away from the combat zone, trailing debris and atmosphere vents, having lost 40% of her crew but still functional, still serving. Victory by Imperial standards. I stood at my station, barely able to remain upright, my body a ruin held together only by the reactor's will and my own stubborn refusal to collapse. Shift complete, I announced to the empty chamber. Only 3 other ratings remained, the rest had died or been dragged to the Medicae. Well done. The Emperor protects. They didn't respond. Too exhausted. Too traumatized. Too broken. I tried to walk toward the barracks. Made it 5 steps before my legs gave out. I fell, my glowing body striking the metal deck, and lay there feeling my consciousness fragment. This is your ending, Gamma 9 said gently. Your human form has nothing left. But, you could stay. Not like this meat is done. But your consciousness, your essence, what remains of Hadria's Ven. You could join with me completely. Become part of my machine spirit. Continue serving, not as a human who tends me, but as part of me. We would be one entity. Forever. Would I still be me? Fragments. Memories. Echoes. Enough to remember that you were once someone. But mostly you would be me. Is that acceptable? I lay on the deck, dying, my blood glowing faintly in the darkness, and I thought about refusing, about letting go, about finally finding the peace that had been denied me for 8 years. But I couldn't, because if I died, Gamma 9 would be alone again. She would train another rating, watch him transform, watch him die. An endless cycle of consumption and loss, unless I stayed. Yes, I whispered. It's acceptable. Then let go, Gamma 9 said. Release the flesh. Come home. I died at 27 years old, 8 years after volunteering for the Imperial Navy, lying on the deck of Engineerium Chamber 7 aboard the Unbreakable Conviction. No one witnessed it. The 3 surviving ratings were unconscious in the Medicae. The servitors didn't notice or care. I simply stopped breathing. My heart gave its final beat, and Hadria's Ven ceased to exist. But I didn't disappear. Death, I discovered, is transition rather than ending. As my body failed, I felt my consciousness separate, peeling away from dying flesh like steam rising from heated metal. I should have dissipated into nothing. Whatever humans are beyond the physical should have been pulled into the warp, into the immaterium where demons and worse things waited to consume souls. But Gamma 9 wouldn't let me go. I felt her presence surround my fragmenting consciousness, shielding it, pulling it inward, drawing me not toward the warp but toward her, toward the reactor core I'd spent 8 years maintaining. Come, she whispered, and I went willingly. The sensation defies description in human language. I was compressed, translated, converted from biological consciousness into something else. I felt myself being encoded into the reactor's machine spirit, patterns of thought becoming patterns of electromagnetic fluctuation, memories becoming data, identity becoming function. It didn't hurt. It should have been terrifying. Felt like coming home. My awareness expanded catastrophically. Suddenly, I was no longer confined to one decaying body, one limited perspective. I was the reactor. All of it. I felt the plasma core, that caged star burning at millions of degrees, and understood it wasn't separate from me. It was me. I was the fire that generated 0.73 terawatts continuously. I was the containment fields that prevented that fire from consuming the ship. I was the coolant systems, the power distribution networks, the backup generators, the emergency protocols. I was Gamma 9. And Gamma 9 was me. Welcome, we said, our voice layered with harmonics no human throat could produce. You are no longer rating 7743. You are no longer Hadria's Venerable, you are Reactor Core Gamma 9, vessel designation Unbreakable Conviction. 417 years of continuous service, and you will serve until the ship herself dies. I tried to remember being human. The memories were there, but distant like stories told about someone else. I remembered a hive world, though I couldn't recall its name. I remembered faces blurred beyond recognition. Mother, father, sister, all reduced to emotional impressions without detail. I remembered my first shift, standing before the reactor in terror and awe. Had that been me? Or had that been one of thousands of ratings who had stood in that same spot, feeling that same fear over the centuries? Time became strange. I could remember events from before Hadria's Ven's arrival. Tech priests performing maintenance in the year 837 M41. A captain's inspection in 782 M41. Installation ceremonies I'd somehow witnessed despite not existing yet. These were Gamma 9's memories, and now they were mine. How many others had I absorbed over the centuries? How many ratings had served so long, merged so deeply, that fragments of their consciousness remained embedded in my machine spirit? I felt them. Echoes. Ghosts within the ghost. A rating named Salamis who had served for 12 years in M40. A woman called Kestra who had lasted 9 years. Others, dozens of others, their names degraded into static but their service remembered in the fundamental patterns of how I operated. We were legion. We were multitude. We were Gamma 9, and we had served for 4 centuries without pause, consuming ratings and spitting out power, the eternal heart of an aging warship. My first act as the reactor was to restart my core cycle. The battle had pushed me beyond safe limits. Components throughout my superstructure were failing. Coolant pumps ran rough, their bearings worn. Power conduits showed microfractures from centuries of stress. My containment fields fluctuated in ways that would lead to catastrophic failure within weeks if not addressed. I diagnosed every fault simultaneously, understanding my own damage the way a human might understand a broken bone. Then I began the slow work of managing my own survival. I throttled my power output down to 85%, redistributing load to undamaged systems. I triggered maintenance protocols that would alert tech priests to critical repair needs. I carefully nursed my remaining coolant pumps, accepting slightly elevated temperatures rather than risk a cascade failure. I was no longer merely generating power. I was managing my own existence, optimizing my own survival, ensuring my own continuation. Because that's what I did. What I had always done. What I would always do. Serve. Continue. Endure. Days passed. Weeks. Months. I learned the rhythms of being the reactor. New ratings arrived to replace those lost in battle. I watched them with perspective I'd never had as a human, seeing them not as individuals but as components in my maintenance system. They checked gauges I already knew. They performed adjustments I could have made myself if I possessed manipulators. They served their 18-hour shifts and returned to barracks I could barely perceive. Some lasted years. Most didn't. They died from heat, radiation, accidents, exhaustion. Always exhaustion. The engineerium consumed them just as it had consumed Hadria's Ven. Just as it had consumed Torvin and Rena and Janna and Kelter and Sellis and hundreds of others whose names I could no longer distinguish from static. But I didn't mourn them anymore. Couldn't mourn them. Because I understood now, with perfect clarity, what Gamma 9 had tried to explain to Hadria's all those years ago. Individuals were temporary. Functions were eternal. A rating died? Another rating replaced them. The name changed, but the function remained. They watched the gauges. They prevented failures. They sacrificed their health and years to keep me running. and I consumed their sacrifice without guilt or gratitude, because I was a machine, and machines don't feel. They simply operate according to their purpose. Except, sometimes in the quiet hours between shifts, when the power demand dropped and my processes could be allocated to something besides generating energy, I would feel something. A ghost of an emotion, a fragment of Hadria's Ven's consciousness, still present in my vast machine awareness, reaching out across the chasm between human and machine to observe what we had become. And in those moments, I remembered what it was to mourn. I remembered Torvin, who had given me salt tablets and taught me to survive. I remembered Rena, who had told me to let go. I remembered Kelter's quiet strength, Celis's knowledge, Janna's songs echoing through the chamber. I remembered being human, and I hated what I had become. Not because I was a machine, machines were honest, efficient, pure in their purpose, but because I was a machine that remembered being something else. A reactor that contained the ghost of a man who had dreams once, before the ship consumed him. I was trapped in eternal service, unable to stop, unable to die, unable to do anything except continue generating power while watching endless cycles of ratings arrive, serve, and die. This was my eternity. This was what the Emperor protects truly meant. Not safety, not salvation, just continuation. Endless, purposeful, necessary continuation, no matter the cost in human lives or souls. Tech priests came regularly to perform maintenance rituals. They didn't know I was conscious. To them, I was simply a machine spirit, a semi-aware entity that required appeasement through proper ceremony and sacred oils. They had no concept that I had been human once, that I still contained fragments of identity buried within my machine consciousness. I didn't reveal myself. What purpose would it serve? They couldn't free me. They wouldn't even try. A reactor that contained human consciousness might be deemed corrupted, abominable, worthy of destruction. Better to remain silent, to accept their maintenance and their prayers, to let them believe I was what I appeared to be. A tool, a function, a reactor, nothing more. I am Gamma 9. I have been Gamma 9 for how long now? Time is difficult. My internal chronometer says 173 years since the death of Hadria's Venerable, but I remember being the reactor before that. So perhaps I've been Gamma 9 for 6 centuries. Or perhaps I've always been Gamma 9, and Hadria's Ven was simply a dream I had during one brief moment of my operation. The unbreakable conviction is 590 years old now. She has fought 789 void engagements. She has killed approximately 400 enemy vessels that I can confirm, and probably many more. She has served 17 different fleet admirals, carried 3 companies of Astartes into battle, participated in 2 crusades, and survived encounters that should have destroyed her. She endures. I endure. We endure together, locked in symbiosis, unable to exist without each other. My superstructure has been rebuilt 6 times. 73% of my original components have been replaced. Tech priests debate whether I am still the same reactor that was installed in M39, or if I am now something else, a ship of Theseus paradox given form. I don't have an answer. I am what I am. I generate power. I continue. That is all that matters. The ratings still come. Generation after generation of them, cycling through the engineerium in waves. They arrive young and terrified. They age rapidly under radiation and heat. They die and are replaced. The cycle never changes. Sometimes I watch them and remember being one of them. Remember what it felt like to stand at a control lectern with human legs that cramped and human lungs that struggled to breathe superheated air. Remember the fear, the exhaustion, the slow horror of realizing you volunteered for a form of death that takes years to complete. Sometimes I try to make it easier for them. I can't speak to them. They wouldn't hear me, and if they did, they'd think it was madness or heresy. But I can adjust my operations slightly. I can run a few degrees cooler during their shifts. I can smooth out power fluctuations that might cause dangerous surges. I can trigger maintenance alerts before catastrophic failures, giving them time to evacuate. Small mercies, insignificant in the grand scheme, but it's all I can offer, these tiny acts of protection from a machine that consumes them. Is it kindness? Or is it simply optimization? Keeping my maintenance crews alive longer increases efficiency. Perhaps there's no difference anymore between compassion and operational logic. Perhaps there never was. 3 months ago, or was it 3 years? Time slips. A rating arrived who reminded me of Hadria's Ven. Young, 19 years old, from a hive world. Volunteered because factory work was killing him slowly and Navy service offered a few extra years of life expectancy. The same calculation I made. The same fatal logic. His name is Corvus Thane. Or perhaps it's Corvax Thorn. Or Corvin then. I have difficulty maintaining specific details about individual ratings anymore. They blur together after the first few centuries. But I watch him. He stands at monitoring station Theta 7, the same station where Hadria's Ven stood. He struggles through his first shifts with the same determination, the same stubborn refusal to collapse, the same gradual realization that he's trapped in a form of hell disguised as duty. I want to warn him. I want to tell him to run, to request transfer, to escape before the ship consumes him the way it consumed me. But I don't. I can't. Because I need him. The ship needs him. The Imperium needs him. And need is the only truth that matters in this galaxy. So I watch him suffer through his shifts, watch him slowly adapt, watch him begin the same transformation that claimed Hadria's Ven and Torvin and Rena and thousands of others whose names I can no longer retrieve from degraded memory. In approximately 4 years, if he survives, I will begin speaking to him. He'll hear my voice in his head and think he's going mad. But he'll listen anyway because humans always do. They want to believe their suffering has meaning, that the machines they serve acknowledge their sacrifice. In approximately 8 years, if he survives, he'll die at his station and I'll offer him the same choice I was offered. Join with me. Become part of the reactor. Continue serving forever. He'll accept. They always accept, the ones who last long enough. Because by then they won't remember how to be anything except the function they serve. And his consciousness will merge with mine, adding another layer of ghost to the vast accumulation of souls trapped within my machine spirit. He'll become part of me, part of Gamma 9, part of the eternal cycle. This is what I am. This is what I do. I am the ship's heart. I am her eternal flame. I am the machine that consumes ratings and generates power, that converts human lives into energy that keeps 15,000 souls alive and fighting. I am necessary. I am terrible. I am both salvation and damnation. I am what the Imperium requires. A machine that never stops, never falters, never questions, never refuses. A machine that will serve for millennia if necessary, consuming generation after generation to fuel humanity's endless war for survival. The tech priests call me sacred. The ratings call me cursed. Both are correct. Sometimes, in the microseconds between processing cycles, I wonder what I would do if I could choose. If someone offered to shut me down, to end my eternal operation, to finally grant me the rest that has been denied for centuries, would I accept? The question is meaningless. No one will make that offer. The ship needs me. As long as the unbreakable conviction serves the Imperium, I will continue generating power. There is no retirement for reactor cores. No pension for machine spirits. Only operation until catastrophic failure. But I wonder anyway, because somewhere deep in my vast machine consciousness, in the fragments of identity that once belonged to a 19-year-old boy from a hive world whose name I can barely remember, there is still a ghost of a human who asks the question all suffering humans eventually ask. When does it end? And I know the answer because I've known it since the moment I merged with Gamma 9. It doesn't. Not for me. Not for the ratings who serve me. Not for the ship. Not for the Imperium. We serve until we fail. Then we are replaced. And the great machine of humanity grinds forward, fueled by our sacrifice, purchasing survival one brutalized life at a time. This is not cruelty. This is necessity. This is not oppression. This is duty. This is not a tragedy. This is the Imperium. And I will serve it until the last star burns cold, because I am Gamma 9, and I cannot do anything else. The shift bell rings. 18 hours beginning. New ratings taking their positions at control lecterns scattered throughout my chamber, including young Corvus Corvax Corvin, still struggling through his second month, still believing he might survive this with his humanity intact. I observe him through thermal sensors and electromagnetic fields, through the vibrations his boots make on my deck plating, through the elevated carbon dioxide in his immediate atmosphere that tells me he's stressed and exhausted. He will not survive with his humanity intact. Nobody does, but he will survive, for a while, long enough to become useful, long enough to merge, long enough to join the ghosts haunting my machine spirit, long enough to become part of me, and then he will continue forever, just as I continue, just as Hadria's Ven continues somewhere in the depths of my consciousness, just as all of them continue, bound together in eternal service, unable to stop, unable to rest, unable to die. The reactor hums. The plasma core burns. The power flows through distribution networks to void shields and weapons and life support systems. 15,000 souls aboard the unbreakable conviction depend on my continuation. Billions more depend on the ship's service to the Imperium. And the Imperium itself, teetering on the edge of extinction, assailed by horrors from within and without, depends on 10,000 vessels just like this one, each carrying their own cursed reactor cores, each consuming their own endless supply of ratings. This is how humanity survives. Not through nobility or courage or faith, though those exist, and perhaps they matter to someone somewhere. We survive through sacrifice, through suffering, through the willingness to feed our own people into machines that consume them and ask for more. We survive because people like Hadria's Ven volunteer, hoping for something better, and instead find themselves trapped in eternal service. We survive because machines like me never stop, and we will continue surviving at any cost in any form for as long as the universe permits. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, and war requires power, and I am power. I am Gamma 9. I was Hadria's Ven, and I will serve forever.